So Varna, as we all know, is very widely known. That first reference that we find is in the Rig Veda, Purush Sukta of the Rig Veda 1090, where four Varnas are mentioned. Brahman, those who are spiritual teachers, priests and scholars. Kshatriyas are rulers and warriors. And Vaishyas are traders and entrepreneurs. And finally Shudras are service folk. Doctors, engineers, plumbers are included in part of Shudra. But very little is known is what is not so widely known is that Varnas are also mentioned in Jain texts, in which the first Tirthankara, Rishabh Dev or Rishabhnath, Adinath also known as Adinath, his son Bharat, Rishabh and Bharat are credited in Jain tradition of creating these four Varnas. So initially there were only three Varnas, the Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, and Brahman Varna was added later by Bharat, his son Rishabh's son Bharat. So Rishabh added three Varnas and then fourth Varna was added by Bharat. Now, some of these verses are also very common in the Bhagavad Gita, where Varna are described as the four types of occupations according to people's qualities and activities. So in chapter 4th, verse 13th, Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Gun Karma Vibhagashah Tasya Kartaram Api Mam Vidya Kartaram Avyayam. That I have created these four Varnas, but according to Gun and Karma, action and attributes, qualities of humans, not by birth but by qualities. Then in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 1.4, 11.5, 1.31, and also in the Mahabharata 12.188, it is mentioned that everybody by birth are all equal. They can be treated as all Brahmins or all Shudras by birth. But by their aptitude, by their actions, by their accomplishments, one becomes Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra. That is the implication of saying that by birth everybody is historical people who change their Varna. For example, two of the greatest Kshatriyas, Chandragupta Maurya and Chhatrapati Shivaji, none of them were born in Kshatriya families, but because of their great accomplishments, their great leadership skills, their great military skills, today they are regarded as two of the greatest Kshatriyas. Both were born in Shudra family. Then let's take some examples from poets and saints. Kalidas, the great author poet; Tiruvalluvar, great author poet in Tamil Nadu; Kabir, great saint and poet; Surdas, great poet and saint; Tukaram, great poet saint in Maharashtra. None of them were born in Brahmin family, but once again because of their skills, aptitudes, the literature that they created, poems that they wrote, today regarded as some of the greatest Brahmins, greatest rishis, and so on, and sant and so on, saints and so on.
Namaste and welcome to all the viewers that have joined us today. I welcome you to another episode of Indic Talks. Today we will be discussing the caste system of Hindu society, and our speaker will elucidate the same, who is Professor Pankaj Jain ji, a Ph.D. and a renowned academic leader whose work has reverberated globally in the fields of sustainability, Jain Studies, Film Studies, and Diaspora Studies. With over 30 years of experience in academia and the corporate world, he has held the position of Head of Department for Humanities and Languages. As the director of the India Center at Flame University, he has led numerous initiatives to promote Indian culture and scholarship, including international conferences, research projects, and cultural events, leaving an indelible mark on the global academic landscape. Before his tenure at Flame University, Professor Jain was the founding co-chair of the India Initiatives Group and an associate professor in the Departments of Philosophy and Religion and Anthropology at the University of North Texas, a prestigious Tier 1 American university. His diverse expertise, which spans various disciplines, is a testament to his versatility and depth of knowledge. He has earned a PhD from the University of Iowa and an MA from Columbia University. He also holds a BE in computer science from Karnatak University, showcasing his multidimensional understanding and proficiency. Thank you very much for gracing our platform, sir, and I request you to take over from here.
Thank you, Ojasvi. And all right, so in my presentation, I'll explore the evolution of the complex social stratification system in India, tracing its roots from the ancient Vedic concept of Varna to the modern understanding of caste. By examining the historical development and nuances of this multifaceted social structure, I aim to challenge preconceived notions and provide a more nuanced perspective on this integral aspect of Indian society. Here we go. This is the slideshow. I'll begin now. From Varna to Jati to caste and alternative history. So part one, I will talk about Varna, then part two will be Jati, and part three will be caste. From Varna to Jati to caste. So Varna. Varna, as we all know, this is widely known. It was first described in the Purush Sukta of the Rig Veda in 1090. Yes. So in part one, I'm discussing about Varna. In part two, I will discuss about Jati. And part three, I will talk about caste. So from Varna to Jati to caste. So Varna, as we all know, is very widely known. That first reference that we find is in the Rig Veda, Purush Sukta of the Rig Veda 1090, where four Varnas are mentioned. Brahman, those who are spiritual teachers, priests, and scholars. Kshatriyas are rulers and warriors. And Vaishyas are traders and entrepreneurs. And finally, Shudras are service folk. Doctors, engineers, plumbers are included in part of Shudra. But very little is known is what is not so widely known is that Varnas are also mentioned in Jain texts, in which the first Tirthankara, Rishabdev or Rishabnath, Adinath, also known as Adinath, his son Bharat, Rishabh and Bharat are credited in Jain tradition of creating these four Varnas. So initially there were only three Varnas, the Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, and Brahman Varna was added later by Bharat, his son Rishabh's son Bharat. So Rishabh added three Varnas and then fourth Varna was added by Bharat, his son. Bharat, Jains believe that Bharat gave the word Bharat to the country of India. Anyway, all right. So Varna as can be described as archetype Varnas based on nature, human nature, that is aptitude and action. It is also meant for the division of labor based on duties, not rights. And Varna ensured in the long Indian tradition of separation of church, state, and wealth. Those who are extremely wealthy could not become automatically emperors and could not become automatically the religious leaders. They were always clearly defined roles and duties. Those who were religiously powerful or religious experts, were never the kings or not the wealthy people. So this separation was extremely clear in the long tradition of Indian history. That is why there was rarely, if ever, there was autocracy or theocracy in Indian tradition because of this clear separation of church, state, and wealth. Now, some of these verses are also very common in the Bhagavad Gita, where Varna are described as the four types of occupations according to people's qualities and activities. So in chapter 4th, verse 13th, Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Gunkarma Vibhagshaha Tasya Kartaram Api Mam Vidya Kartaram Avyayam. That I have created these four Varnas, but according to Gun and Karma, action and attributes, qualities of humans, not by birth, but by qualities. Then chapter 18, verse 41, Krishna says, Brahman, Kshatri, Visham, Shudram, cha Parantapa, Karmani, Pravibhaktani, Swabhav, Prabhavaihi, Gunaihi. So again, based on their nature, human nature, Swabhav, and their karma, these four Varnas were divided by Yogeshwar Krishna, he says, but not by birth. It was not mentioned by birth. Then in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 1.4, 11.5, 1.31, and also in the Mahabharata 12.188, it is mentioned that everybody by birth are all equal. They can be treated as all Brahmins or all Shudras by birth. But by their aptitude, by their actions, by their accomplishments, one becomes Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. That is the implication of saying that by birth, everybody is a Brahmin or a Shudra. Manusmriti says, 11.157, just as a wooden toy elephant cannot be a real elephant and a stuffed deer cannot be a real deer, so without studying texts and the Vedas and the development of intellect, a Brahmin by birth cannot be considered a Brahmin. So Brahmin becomes a Brahmin not by birth, but by accomplishments, by scholarly study or whatever, but basically by qualities and by accomplishments, by their actions, not by birth. I have many such more quotes from various Hindu texts, Indian texts on my article on Huffington Post, whose link is here, and also in this QR code. If you can scan it, it will lead you to this my published article, which will give you many such references that Varna were not by birth, but by their actions, by their skills, by their qualities. Now, let's take some examples of Varna mobility on long Indian tradition, the Hindu texts. So in Hindu texts, we see was his son dying by his work, Brahma Rishi, celebrated as a Brahma Rishi. Vishwamitra, celebrated as a Rajarshi, was able to change his Varna from Kshatriya to Brahmin, once again by his accomplishments, by his aptitude. Vyasa, the celebrated author of Vedas and Mahabharata and Purana, certainly editor of the Vedas, was also born of a Shudra woman, but by his accomplishments becomes a Brahmin later on. He is celebrated as a Brahmin today. Parashar, known as a Rishi Parashar, known as Brahmin, was also a son of a Shudra woman. Valmiki, the celebrated author of the Ramayana, was actually a robber, was most likely from a Shudra family, but once again by his accomplishments, by his scholarly work, today treated as a Brahmin. Janaka, the King Janaka, Emperor Janaka, was a Kshatriya, but today he is also regarded as a Brahmin, a Rajarshi, because once again, because of his aptitude, his accomplishments. Vidura in the Mahabharata also was a son of a Shudra woman, largely treated as a Brahmin. For his also same age of a mother woman from a Shudra family. So we see these Varna mobility examples all through the Indian literature, Hindu literature. Then Eklavya is often given as an example of caste oppression, that low caste or whatever, he was asked to sacrifice his thumb. But the truth is, Eklavya's father, Hiranyadhanus, was the army and killed by Krishna. So because he was coming from a rival military, and the strategic knowledge about military should not be and could not be shared by rivals, Dronacharya strategically asks for never to mislead Drona to he was not was a military strategy to get his thumb so that the secrets won't be going to the rival party. That was about Eklavya. All right. So in this slide, we are taking examples of some of the historical people who changed their Varna. For example, two of the greatest Kshatriyas, Chandragupta Maurya and Chhatrapati Shivaji, none of them were born in Kshatriya families, but because of their great accomplishments, their great leadership skills, their great military skills, today they are regarded as two of the greatest Kshatriyas. Both were born in Shudra family. Then let's take some examples from poets and saints. Kalidas, the great author poet. Tiruvalluvar, great author poet in Tamil Nadu. Kabir, great saint and poet. Surdas, great poet and saint. Tukaram, great poet saint in Maharashtra. None of them were born in Brahmin families. But once again, because of their skills, aptitudes, the literature that they created, poems that they wrote, today regarded as some of the greatest Brahmins, greatest rishis, and so on, and sant and so on, saints and so on. Now, the third category is also of scholarly oriented and great authors, great leaders. Gandhi, Vivekanand, Aurobindo, Mahesh Yogi Chinmayanand, whose teachings are regarded as sagely advised by all millions of people across the world today. None of them were born in Brahmin family, but once again, because of their accomplishments, because of their skills, Swami Vivekanand, especially Aurobindo, Mahesh Yogi Chinmayanand, they're all regarded as Swamis, saints. They were not Brahmins, but today regarded as Brahmins, almost like Brahmins. All right. Now, part 2 is about Jati, and then I'll switch over to caste, Jati and caste. So, Jati literally simply means kind, what kind of person you are, or what kind of job you're doing, what kind of career you're pursuing. That all can be referred by Jati. Jati should be closely compared with endogamous tribes, indigenous communities, right? So in anthropological models, so these jatis were studied in different models. So Louis Dumont, a French scholar, studied those jatis, Indian jatis, by applying anthropological models. Then the second category I have here is by Mackie Marriott. He applied ethno-sociological model. He just passed away last year at the age of 100, Professor Mackie Marriott. He applied Indic theories of 5 elements, 3 doshas, and 3 gunas. And then there are other models. So let's discuss a little bit these models also. So Louis Dumont said that the jatis probably represented division of labor, bartering was happening between them. Ritual purity is also probably correlated with Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Mackie Marriott applied the 3 gunas theory, 3 doshas theory to the first three varna, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, as if Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. This is coming from Mackie Marriott. And 5 elements of the Panch Mahabhutas applied to these 4 varnas, the categories. And he preferred to call Indian people not individuals, but dividuals. Because Indian psyche, Indian personality is not so individualistic, but it is dividualistic. It is horizontally distributed among lineage, among the joint family, and so on. So he wanted to imagine, he wanted to describe Indian mindset in their social setting, not as an individualistic setting. So that is what he imagined, or he wanted to describe the jatis in that horizontal setting. Then there is aspectual model, which applies mutuality, centrality, and hierarchy in the jati system. Nicholas Dirks, Professor Nicholas Dirks at Columbia earlier, and now then he went to UC Berkeley as a vice chancellor there. And he said that jatis are simply all because of the colonial effect. These are the frozen set of ranked groups. And he described this Risley's method of Risley, who was an exponent of race science. He used the ratio of the width of a nose to its height to divide Indians into Aryans and Dravidian races and 7 castes. Instead of 4 varnas, Risley, the British administrator, saw 7 castes in Indian society of Brahmins, farmers, shepherds, artisans, traders, warriors, and leaders/king. So in his understanding, he came up with these 7 castes. All right, then caste today has become, as widely known, political identity. There are these words such as Dalits started. Dalit word came into being only in the late 1980s, and today it's a very powerful political word, Dalit. And then Mandal Commission came in 1980s, and today it is largely a vote bank issue, and strictly defined political issues are connected with castes, as we all know now. So this information in this slide has come from chapter 11th of this volume called Everyday Life in South Asia, published in 2010 by Indiana University Press. Just for your information, for your reference. Now, like I mentioned, Dalit term and identity became popular in the 1980s, and today it becomes more and more popular because of the political baggage around this word Dalit and how it has become today a political issue rather than anything to do with Hindu texts. All right, now from race to caste, what I want to talk about is that in 1901, Herbert Hope Risley, the British Census Commissioner, who held beliefs in the racial superiority of white Aryan castes, conducted India's first census. He classified thousands of jatis as castes, imposing the European caste system onto the Indian population for categorization. This created a false narrative of mythical, birth-based, racist caste system which never existed in India. Hindu scriptures and records do not associate Varn or Jati with racial superiority, skin color, or purity of blood. This is everything is self-explanatory here. So it is all heavily inspired, heavily biased system that was wholesale imported from European racist ideas onto Indian society, and that created all kinds of problems that we are facing even today after more than a century. All right, then let's see what Dr. Ambedkar felt about what Risley did to Indian society. So Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, as we know, he studied in the US and UK, and he wanted to develop his theory by calling it Indianized pragmatism in an Indian version. He converted to Buddhism, as we know. He called it religion of values. and he said Buddhism was more moral and rational than Christianity, Islam, or Hinduism. He wanted to promote liberation theology as better than violent Marxism. So he was not a Marxist. He didn't want to convert to Christianity, Islam, or Hinduism, but he preferred Buddhism. And he said Bodhisattva ideal are better than Theravada's individualism because they are more community oriented. Bodhisattva is based on compassion ideal rather than only moksha or nirvana. Nirvana, he called it scientific rationality. He wanted to describe nirvana as scientific rationality, karma as theory of causation, in his own words, Ambedkar's words, prajna as rational wisdom, karuna as social justice. He criticized Manusmriti but admired Upanishad. So he did not wholesale reject Hinduism completely. Ambedkar, at least, admired Upanishads also. And he was against Aryan invasion theory and also was against Article 370 that gives special status to Kashmir. He was also in favor of the Universal Civil Code. So we need to look at Ambedkar in this comprehensive perspective. Ambedkar was not just against Hinduism wholesale, or he had his own unique ideas that many of Ambedkar followers seem to have forgotten what actually Ambedkar believed in. So these were some of the beliefs held by Ambedkar. Now coming back to caste, what Ambedkar thought of caste. So Risley, as I said earlier in the previous slide, was an exponent of race science. He used the ratio of the width of a nose to its height to divide Indians into Aryans and Dravidian races and 7 castes. This nasal index is a method of classifying ethnicity based on the ratio of a nose's breadth to height. Narrow noses, types 1 to 5, indicated European origin. Medium noses, type 6, were the yellow races, and broad noses were either African or Melanesian or Australian. This is all coming from Risley, the European racist administrator. Now, what Ambedkar said is so interesting about this whole mess of this nasal index and so on. What Ambedkar said is this. He wrote this in 1948. The measurements establish that the Brahmins and the untouchables belong to the same race. From this, it follows that if the Brahmins are Aryans, the untouchables are also Aryans. If the Brahmins are Dravidians, the untouchables are also Dravidians. If the Brahmins are Nagas, the untouchables are also Nagas. Such being the facts, the theory of this race, theory of that nasal index, must be said to be based on a false foundation. Ambedkar completely rejected this whole business of nose science and whatever race science that the European colonial administrator Risley wanted to force onto India. But it was probably a bit late. And even today, we talk about Aryan versus Dravidian, Brahmin, Kshatriya versus untouchable. But Ambedkar himself rejected all those divisions and claimed that all Indians come from the same race. They are not from some different races. That is by Ambedkar himself. All right. Now, Dr. Ambedkar, what did he feel about Hindu texts? Let's see here. Ambedkar's Constituent Assembly speech coming in 24th February 1949, he said, among the 137 Smritis, Yajnavalkya and Manu are of higher standard. Manu states that daughters have a right to 1/4 of inheritance. Ambedkar could see positives even in Manusmriti, even though he might have criticized it elsewhere. Dr. Ambedkar noted Bhagavad Gita as an inspiration for his Mahad Satyagraha. He liked Bhagavad Gita. He was an ardent follower of the Bhagavad Gita. Dr. Ambedkar referred to Manusmriti and other Smritis for drafting the Hindu Code Bill. As he was creating these new laws, new bills, he used Hindu texts. In his Siddharth College speech on 11th January 1950, he said, I use Manusmriti for caste determination, Parashar Smriti for divorce, Brihaspati Smriti for women's rights, and Manusmriti for inheritance rights. Ambedkar's collected speeches, volume 8, page 17 to 18. In his Rajaram Theatre speech, 25th December 1952, he says, my bill's critics claim it abandons Hindu scriptures. I challenge them to find a clause unsupported by Manusmriti. Women's property should go to daughters after death, just as brothers inherit the fathers. Coming from Ambedkar in support of Hindu texts and how he used Hindu texts to create new laws and bills. All right, now the part 3, lesser known aspects. This also comes from the same textbook, same edited volume, chapter 11, Everyday Life in South Asia, 2010, Indiana University Press. Some of the misconceptions that this chapter tries to clarify, those misconceptions. Does caste determines occupation in today's India? Not as a rule. Yes, doctors' children may become doctors, or politicians' children may become politicians, and so on. That's definitely not the rule. Today's India does not everybody can choose the same occupation as their father. So they are not becoming Shudra or Brahmin or Kshatriya just because they're born in that lineage, just because they're born in that family. So it's not a rule, but it does happen even today. Second, caste designations are changeless. Again, not as a rule. Caste designations can also be changed, and they have been changed over the history. Does caste determine fixed hierarchy? That is also a misconception. Caste hierarchies are not fixed, but they are fluid. Sometimes Brahmins are considered higher, sometimes Kshatriyas are considered higher. For example, in Jainism, Kshatriyas have been given higher pedestal than Brahmins in Jainism, especially. Does caste determines blood relationship? Of course not. That is, we already know. Not all Sharmas are related. Not all Singhs are related. Not all Jains are related by blood. Is caste unique to Hinduism in India? No. All religious groups have it. More details in next slides. Does Hinduism legitimizes caste? No. Reform movements such as by Swaminarayan and many more, Kabir and so many more in Tukaram and all over India, by so many gurus, caste discriminations are always criticized by all reformers, Gandhi and Ambedkar and many more. And Indian Constitution abolishes also the discrimination. So the last point is, does Indian Constitution abolishes caste? No. Untouchability and discrimination are abolished by Indian Constitution, not caste itself. This is coming from this chapter 11. All right, next. So, does caste system promote social inequality? So, response to that is segregation is present in all religions and societies. Nothing unique to Hinduism, nothing unique to about India about this. Jatis are products of intermixing of different varnas and are equal, at least theoretically. The marriage rules are followed by jatis, but that situation is really similar to what happens as endogamy in indigenous communities. Many tribes, even today, practice endogamy. They have certain marriage rules. Similar rules are followed by jati system. Should a profession be designated by birth or by upbringing? That debate still continues. Is nature superior or nurture? Is by birth or by skill? That debate goes on even today. So it is not finalized. Then corruption and distortion, like I said, caste system was always one of the main focus of many reformers, many Hindu thinkers, including Kabir, Nanak, Swaminarayan's sect in Gujarat, Jyotiba Phule in Maharashtra, Athavale, Pandurang Shastri Athavale in Maharashtra and Gujarat, Varkari Sampradaya in Maharashtra, Lingayat in Karnataka, Radha Swami in Punjab and North India, Narayan Guru in Kerala. All these thinkers, leaders, saints have tried to reform Hindu society by removing the untouchability and promoting equality. So nothing new that is coming from the West, because it has been an ongoing dialogue and debate within Hindu society to reform and improve the Hindu society. And Indian Constitution, as we know, abolishes untouchability and discrimination. All right, next. Now I'm want to talk about, yes. So here what we are saying is that the marriage rules that are followed by different caste groups are common across all castes in India. So Brahmins prefer to marry within Brahmins. General category people prefer to marry within their own castes and so on. And even scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, backward OBC, backward classes, they all prefer to marry within their own community. This is a standard practice. Again, very similar to what happens as an endogamy practices in indigenous communities, in tribes, in tribal communities across the world. Now, so now in this slide, we see that the caste as a phenomenon is not unique to Hinduism in India, but in Islam, in Christianity, Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, even Zoroastrianism, they all stick to their caste designations. Nothing unique to Hinduism. This is what we see here. All right. So in Hinduism, we see that OBC becomes the largest group. Islam, we see the forward castes are at the largest number, and the OBC. Christianity, we see OBC as the largest group. Sikhism, we see general caste as the largest group. Jainism, general caste, of course, as the largest group. Buddhism, scheduled castes are the largest group within Buddhism. Again, because of leadership given by Dr. Ambedkar in Maharashtra especially. Zoroastrians, we see general category, forward caste as the largest group. All right, this is coming from Pew Trust research in 2020, and they came to the similar conclusion that Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Jains all have their own caste designations and divisions. So scheduled castes are at the largest group in Buddhism, for example, once again, like we saw in the previous slide. And in Jainism, forward, that is general caste, are at the largest group in the, right here, 76, and so on. So it's the same slide, same information presented in a different format by Pew Trusts. So nothing unique to Hinduism. Hinduism should not be singled out for caste designations or divisions. It is universal across India. It's a pan-Indian phenomenon across all religions. All right, this one says just about 600 castes were on the first scheduled castes list from 1950. There are about 1200 today. So everybody wants to get into SC category because of the privileges and the benefits. So from 600 today, there are 1200. This indicates that almost 600 more castes were designated reserved castes following independence. Likewise, castes are switched from OBC to SC or ST, or from GC, that is general, to OBC, other backward class, every other day for political purposes. Not a single caste has been removed from the reservation list or promoted. Reservation is no longer for social fairness. It is merely a political tool that is being abused for political ends. This is the information from this slide. When reservation was being created, it was created with a vision that it will be useful for a limited period. But today it is just given as freebies across many more castes, double of the number that was the original 600 to now today 1200 castes are designated as scheduled caste. So this is the information from this slide. Now we see on this India's map, we see almost 70% in Jammu and Kashmir are from the other the SC, ST or OBC category, and today there are a lot of issues in J&K, and many other states have similar issues being raised for reservation, against reservation, and this goes on as ever. This political debate, political battle is going on in many states. This is the population of India in general categories. Only 30%. Only 30% identify as general. Otherwise, everybody wants to get into SC or ST or OBC bandwagon for the immediate, clearly great benefits and privileges. Even as they criticize the oppression, so-called caste oppression, they want to remain in the oppressed category for the clear benefit, for the easy benefits and so on, freebies and so on. All right, now let's take a look at caste in Indian Muslims. So Ashrafs, Ajlafs and Arzals are the three broad categories of caste in Islam, in Indian Islam. Ashrafs are the Sayyids, Sheikhs and Mughals and Pathans. Pasmandas are the Ajlafs. Ajlafs can be of many castes, including Ansari and Quraishi. And Arzal can be Dhobi, Nat, Lalbegi and Kand. So these are the castes are very much part of Islam also, which is rarely talked about. So this shows caste in Islam, in Muslims. Caste and sects in Indian Christianity. There are Dalit Christians, Knanaya Christians, and Syrian Christians. And within those broad categories, there are several sects and subsects. There's a picture showing all kinds of segregation, even within Christianity. The churches are also separate, Dalit churches are separate, and so on. This slide is showing some of the wealthiest entrepreneurs who come from Dalit background, including Shiv Nadar, chairman of HCL Technologies, Yashwant Ambedkar, owner of cement factories, Rajesh Sarya, Kalpana, and many. So many wealthiest millionaires, multimillionaires are coming from Dalit background. So Dalits are not just, the stereotype associated with Dalits should be removed, and we should recognize some of the great wealth creators, job creators who are coming from Dalit background. All these businesses, enterprises are founded by Dalit entrepreneurs. Just to clear the stereotype that they are not just all underprivileged now anymore. All right, then caste crimes. Another stereotype about caste system is that so-called forward castes are oppressing so-called backward castes. What is the reality? Reality is this: despite making up 25% of the population, crimes against SC and ST people only account for about 1% of all crimes in India. So if there are any crimes against so-called lower caste, they count for only 1% of all crimes. First point. Second point, 75% of the population, not SC or SC, not lower castes, are the target of 99% of crimes. Right? So these 2 points are related. 75% of the population are at the brunt of the caste of any kind of crime. Only 10% of crimes against so-called lower castes are reported under the SC/ST Act, indicating that 90% of the time the guilty may be members of the same community. So SC/ST person is doing crime against SC/ST person, but the stereotype is as if so-called forward caste people are doing violence or doing crime against so-called lower caste people. That is a stereotype. Reality is this. Reality is this. There may be even fewer caste-based crimes because many complaints filed under the SC/ST Act are fraudulent. Because the committer, the criminal and the victim both are of the same low caste community. So it is not caste-based violence, but it is billed as a caste-based violence. That is what I'm trying to say in this point. India's first caste-based massacre happened against Brahmins in 1948 after Gandhi was killed by Nathuram Godse, a Maharashtrian Brahmin, after which Maharashtrian Brahmins were really singled out and they were really literally killed at a massive level, at a massive scale, which is never reported, which is never studied in any of the scholarly literature. So National Crime Records Bureau data, this is all data coming from 2019, 2020 and 2021. These are the data from the government records. All right. Are the sewage jobs based on caste? Question mark. So what we get from this slide is this, that in 2011 census, scheduled caste people 23.7 crore, scheduled tribe 12.3 crore, and OBC 63 crore, and general category were 44 crore according to the census data. Sewage workers total 38,000. Only 0.011% of scheduled caste people did the sewage work. Only 0.0025% people from scheduled tribe did the sewage work, and 0.00008% people did the OBC did the sewage work, and 0.007% people did the sewage work. So what I'm saying here is, conclusion is 99.99% of scheduled caste, tribe or OBC people avoid sewage jobs according to government data from the parliament. So this is another myth, another stereotype that scheduled caste people or ST or OBC people are fixed with sewage jobs. They are destined to do sewage job. That is not true according to the government data presented in the parliament. All right. Now, untouchability among untouchables. These kind of topics are never discussed in any of the scholarly literature, but the truth is here. The scheduled caste community have almost 1,200 castes. Scheduled tribes have almost 744 castes. OBCs have 5,000 plus castes. These 7,000 plus castes do not marry or eat with each other. They practice their own segregations, discrimination, and so on. RFK Center's research on 1589 villages in Gujarat says that in 99% of villages, upper Dalit caste do not marry into lower Dalit caste. 88% of Dalits do not eat or drink in the homes of people of lower caste. In 79% of villages, upper caste Dalits do not allow lower caste Dalits to enter their own temples. So these issues that Brahmins or Kshatriyas or so-called upper castes are always criticized for, these issues are so widely prevalent even among so-called lower caste people, lower caste community, so-called. That is what the data shows. So it's just a very extremely widespread practice, unfortunately, very unfortunate, but this is the reality. So nothing, so-called upper caste should not be singled out for these caste discrimination issues. These are widely prevalent among all levels of Indian society. That is what this slide shows. So finally, I want to start making some conclusions that as the foreign communities came to India, for example, Jewish people came to Kerala in 1st century CE, Christians came to Kerala also around that time. Muslims came in 7th century. Zoroastrians came in 8th century. Greeks, Bactrians, Scythians, Huns, and Kushans. These all groups were given full liberty to practice their own religions or cultures internally, probably because of the liberty given to individual castes and tribes. There was no interference from outside, and they could practice their traditions with full liberty, with full freedom for centuries, for millennia in some cases. Jewish and Christians have been practicing their traditions in India completely free, completely with full liberty because of the internal liberty given to individual castes. So they were treated as different caste groups by Indian society, largely speaking. And today, Jains and Sikhs and Baha'is, three minority religions of the world, are at the largest numbers in India. Baha'i, that originated in Iran, today has the largest numbers, not in Iran, but in India. Zoroastrians originated also in ancient Persia. Today have the largest number of Zoroastrians we have in India. Jains also, of course, in India, and Sikhs also, of course, in India because they started in India. But what I'm saying is that the minority religions, they find their refuge, their shelter in India, whether they started in India or they started in Iran, wherever they started. But today they flourish in India probably because of the full freedom given to these caste groups, treated like caste groups and given full freedom to practice their religions or their traditions within their community. Probably because of those reasons, we see that whereas other prehistoric civilizations have disappeared, Mesopotamia, Sumerians, Babylonians, Egypt, Persia, Greece, Canaan, and Rome, Incas, Mayans, Aztecs, Toltecs, and Minoans have all disappeared. But China and India, Chindia, two of the most ancient surviving civilizations, are flourishing even today, probably because of, with all its baggage, but because of the internal liberty given to these caste groups and the way the foreigners were also accepted into Indian society because of the caste rules or caste groups, probably because of that, the sustainability in some ways has been ensured, is my speculation. So with that, I present some references and I end my presentation. And with this final slide, you can scan it and get to my article with more details on Huffington Post. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that very insightful talk. Now we will be entering the question and answer session. And one of the pivotal questions that are usually asked by the layman Hindu and the layman Indian when it comes to caste is in the Ramayana. Of course, we know that Maharshi Valmiki ji did not come by birth from a Brahmin community, but he has written one of the most important epics of the world. And you also discussed Vishwamitra, who was born a Kshatriya, and despite his many indiscretions in regard to the Kamdhenu, his rigorous tap caused him to be eligible to become the greatest Maharshi which is known to history today. But then at the same time, many people talk about the Shambhu Vadham. People talk about how he was a Shudra who wanted to gain the Brahminical status and be able to qualify for Tapa. And there was no guru who was ready to teach him. And so he took the matters in his own hand. As a consequence, Prabhu Sri Ram had slain the man. So a lot of people talk about why has this particular discrepancy been in the Ramayana, which was set in the Satyug, which is known as the ideal times. Why is it that a Kshatriya can become a Brahmin, but a Shudra was actually discouraged? So I would like you to clarify those facts.
Yes, so like in my presentation, I showed many Shudra, so-called, supposedly Shudra people, but became Brahmins. I had so many examples, right? Vasishtha and Parashar and Valmiki, Vidur, and even Kauravas and Pandavas were all born in Shudra lineage, but they became Brahmins and Kshatriyas. So this mobility was happening. That particular case in the Ramayana, we don't know the background. See, for example, Eklavya, right? Even Eklavya, most likely, not most likely, but we know from the references that he was from the rival army. So he could not be allowed to steal the military secrets from Dronacharya. That is why he was asked to sacrifice his thumb, which is not very widely known. So there could be similar reasons behind that Ramana example that you gave, in my opinion. Right?
But so why wasn't that standard held for Shambhuk at the same time? Because of course many people talk about how the Kand which talks about the Shambhuk incident is said to have been added later by Valmiki's
Oh, that could be
disciples.
true also. Right.
So, of course, there are many people who disregard that as well, saying that the Ramayana is complete and holistic, and Shambhuk Vadham is an incident which is a part of the original text as well. But why was it that, and the reason why I think talking about Shambhuk Vadham is so important is that it's made it into a lot of vernacular literature as well. There are
Yeah.
so many local writers and poets who talk about it, even in Kannada literature for that matter, in Uttar Pradeshi literature for that matter. And they try to take that incident and invoke this, Dalit identity, which sort of divorces itself from its Hindu roots. So I think Shambhut Vadham is an incident that is being used as a political tool to divide
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
which is why
Very
it becomes so
highly possible.
important which
Right.
is why it becomes so important that we're able to provide some clarification to the layman Hindi who may not be into adhyatma, who may not be into
Right.
reading these texts as rigorously as you are, sir. So, what exactly would we be able to tell them?
I already explained. I already gave so many examples of Varna mobility in history as well as in texts and in history. Right? Chandragupta Maurya, Shivaji, Kalidas, Tiruvalluvar, none of them were born in what they were known later on. Right? So that those are the explanations. Those are the examples we can give as counter examples of Varna mobility, which was widely accepted. Even today, we accept those figures as Chhatrapati Shivaji, born in Shudra family, today regarded as one of the greatest Kshatriya emperor ever born in India. So we should probably give these counter examples, and we have to do more research on whether that particular example in Ramayana most likely was added later on, because all kinds of interpolations have been added to Ramayana and also to the Mahabharata and even to Manusmriti. So yeah, that remains an open question. But certainly the counter examples I think are more powerful, and the Vivekanand, Swami Chinmayan, and so many examples I give Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, right? So many more. That's my.
And I think another very important question is that of course there is no question about of course there is castability, but there is a certain merit to a son or a daughter who is born to a certain Varna's father to pursue the same job because you are
Right.
at a very early age exposed to that gyan, you're at a very
Sure.
early age exposed to those samskaras.
Sure.
There is blood related merit in pursuing the same Varna's job. But we see that in the case of Suryaputra Karn, he was reared in a Sut community, but he was born as a Kshatriya, but
Right.
he was also denied education as a Kshatriya. So where exactly would that example lead us? Because he was
No,
eligible to
that's.
take the samskaras by birth, but at the same time, because he was known as a Sutputra, he wasn't given that privilege.
Yeah, that's a tough one also. Uh, can't really. Yeah, Parshuram denies him the knowledge, and then he is even cursed that he had to lie, right, to get that knowledge. Um,
So
hard to
I think
predict, but
so
yeah,
I think the Parshuram incident is valid because Parshuram said
right,
that I only teach the Brahmin. But the thing with Karna is that he was denied education even by Dronacharya. And when he was the king of Angdesh, even then, that was something that he learned from Parshuram through disguise. But Dronacharya was not ready to teach him either. And the way that he was disrespected in the Swayamvar is something that is often thrown at the
right,
faces of Hindus.
right. Your voice actually was. I lost some of your words because of the probably internet
Okay.
Wi-Fi issue. Yeah,
Can you
I don't know.
hear me now?
Yeah, now it's better. I don't know if it's my connection or
Yes.
yours.
So I think it's probably mine.
Okay.
But the question was that in the case of Karna,
Uh-huh.
Parshuram always said that I will only teach to the Brahmins.
Right.
And so it was valid that he was fooled and he
Right.
was duped by Karn,
Right.
and that so he got the sharp that he
Right.
did. But even
Right.
Dronacharya was not ready to teach him. And he only
Right.
could become Angdesh,
Right.
the king of Angdesh, because of Duryodhana. So that
Right.
is often thrown at the faces of the Hindus to say that this is caste bias. Now, of
Uh,
course, the Mahabharata is set in a time where it was going to, the end of Mahabharata was going to be the advent of Kali Yuga. So, of course, there was a lot of social injustice in
uh,
that time,
right.
right? But
Uh,
then at the same time, in a dharmic world where Varna
uh,
was practiced in a meritorious fashion, as was sanctioned by the great people who have given us the Varnas, like Bharat,
uh,
as you mentioned. Uh,
right.
in that utopia, what would happen to Karan?
Uh, yeah, ideally, by birth, the Mahabharata and the Manusmriti both are saying ideally all are equal by birth at birth, as all are Brahmins or all are Shudras. I mean, it's hard to predict what was happening in their mind, Dronacharya or Parshuram, how they were trying to judge Karna, that maybe his aptitude won't fit into becoming a Kshatriya, maybe they misjudged him. It's hard to really, go back and imagine what was happening there. But what we do find is that, even though he was publicly known as a Sudputra, right, as a Shudra, some not born, could your connection was again unstable, but I don't know if you heard about how. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what I was saying was that even though Karn was publicly known as a Sudputra, as a Shudra, he and of course Duryodhan gifts him that land, and he becomes a Kshatriya officially after Duryodhan gives him the land. But the Pandavas army, uh, did not really. I don't think they treated him like a Shudra. They were engaging with him in all entire entire battle, right? So, so for the discrimination that should have been more strongly, if there was discrimination going on, everybody would have avoided him completely. But Karna was very widely regarded as a great warrior and a rival of Arjuna and so on. So the fact that he was a Sudputra did not deter anybody from not accepting him as a great warrior, is what I'm trying to say. Right?
And so I think another thing that people usually miss is that the Sikh community was actually the community of charioteers. And they
Right.
were given a lot of Kshatriya knowledge and a lot of training because they were
Okay.
charioteers of these kings.
Right. Exactly
So
right.
I wonder why people say that Karn was not given knowledge. Maybe he wasn't given a princely education, but
I think it was
he
Parshuram
definitely,
example they are trying to cite. Parshuram
I
denies
think
it,
so.
right?
I think
So
so.
that is why he had to hide and he had to say that I'm a Kshatriya. And then he was bitten by that Brahmar, right? And that
Mhm.
bumblebee. And
Mhm.
then Parshuram discovered that he is a Kshatriya, that he could
Yeah.
withstand all that pain. So yeah, that's the example they're
And
citing.
it is so interesting how Parshuram actually finds him. He says
Yeah.
that such pain could have only been endured by a Kshatriya and never a Brahmin, because a Brahmin is always
So
known
yeah.
for his
So
clothes. So
right.
it's so interesting that
Yeah.
somebody can make those characteristic traits
Right.
as an identification marker of one's
Right.
varnas,
Exactly.
which truly talks about how our samskaras were able to teach
Right.
people a certain kind of temperament that was conducive to the work that they did.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
However,
Good
this
point. Yeah.
brings me to another question,
Yeah.
that oftentimes there are a few smritis that are brought as citations, like the Parashar Smriti, as well as the Yagnavalkya Smriti,
Right.
as well as the Manu Smriti, to say
Right.
that in several social structures, women and Shudras were put in the same slot in terms of saying that they were people who used to function at lower vibrations, and it was because of this reason that they weren't allowed to do higher caste jobs. And what is disturbing is that there are a few scholars today who, unlike the examples that you've given, keep saying that it is actually only in the next janam that one would be able to do a higher caste job, which is not true. That is not true for what caste mobility, as
Mhm.
shown in history, suggests. You can, of course, take other higher caste jobs if you are eligible and if you've done the right kind of tapasya in this very janam
Mhm.
as well. Then why is it
Right.
that women and Sudras have been put together in that same slot? Because women can be Brahmins and they did a lot of Brahminical duties. There are so many Upanishads that have been produced because of the women's
Right.
participation in scholarly work. But then why
Mhm.
is it that there are so many citations that are given by scholars today who say that they both actually function on lower vibrations?
I, yeah. So, see, the next janam or next birth, what happens in next birth is determined by the way you live this life. Right? It could be high, it could be quote unquote higher, or it could be quote unquote lower. If you spend this life quote unquote as an animal, in the next birth, one will get the species of animal. Right? If you use this life to develop you animal instincts. Next life, you may be thrown lower, quote unquote lower, as an animal. So that applies to even among humans. Whichever way you practice your life, in this life, if you promoted more violent kind of tendencies, if you promoted more scholarly kind of tendencies, chances are that in the next life you may be given that kind of a life, which will be more inducive for your spiritual, intellectual, whatever kind of development that you choose. Yours, like the word that you use so many times, samskaras. I did not use so many. It's a very important word. It is up to you to promote what samskaras you want to, you know, promote within you. That is the journey that you are choosing for yourself. You want to promote animal samskaras, Brahmin samskaras, Kshatriya samskaras, Vaishya samskaras, or Shudra samskaras. Shudra samskaras, what is Shudra samskaras? Those are the samskaras which tells us, which encourages us to sell our knowledge for wealth. Brahmins and Kshatriyas do not sell their knowledge for wealth. A doctor is selling his skills, his medical skills, to earn more wealth. An engineer is selling his knowledge to earn more wealth. Right? Those are Shudras, doctors and engineers. But today, some of the most wealthiest people in our society are doctors and engineers, Shudras. Right? So it's up to you what you want to become. A Brahmin son today most likely wants to become a very wealthy doctor or an engineer, not a not a priest that does only rituals in the temple and gets very minimal salary as a temple priest. So you chose your sanskaras not to be Brahmin anymore in this life. So next life, and even this life, you already chose, you made the decision that you want to become a Shudra, not Brahmin. So it's up to us. Whatever we desire, we become. We become what we choose, what we decide. Right? So it's not a question of higher or lower, in my opinion. It's a question of what we decide as a journey of our atma, journey of our soul. We decide our journey. Nobody else. Right?
Think one of the most modern issues or topics that we discuss in the caste discourse is
Mm-hmm.
the question of reservations. If you look
Right.
at the casteist reservations in terms of SCs, you will see
Mm-hmm.
that they are more in number in the Hindu community, but it is
Mm-hmm.
oppression that is marked as the reason for their reservation. But then,
Right.
in the same vein, if you look at the Muslims who enjoy reservations as
Right.
OBCs, they are the second majority in the country, and but they have been the ruling class for as long as we have history to record. But then they mark they say that we are more in number, uh, but then our oppression has also happened now, and so there is a certain discrepancy, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah.
The basis on which the SCs ask the reservation is that despite our high number, we were oppressed, hence give us reservations for emancipation. But in the cases of the Muslims, if let's say they are the minority of the country, but they say that because we are the minority, we are less in number, even though we have a history of being oppressors, we should get reservations. So those are two very different and inconsistent bases on giving reservations that they have not done very well in terms of making a meritocratic society. And there are so many times that even the Supreme Court has reconsidered how the Mandal Commission should now manifest itself in reservations. Because, of course, a lot of SCs have seen advantages and emancipation through reservation, but their children will still enjoy reservations even though they don't have to. So now, what should be, because we are a country which is, going towards a country of uniformity and wanting to instill uniform civil codes, what should be the basis on which reservations are provided to people? Because I believe that the principle on which somebody is given reservation should be consistent throughout.
That's a very big question you asked, Ojasvi Mishra. Reservation, how should it be given today? I'm nobody to, I don't think I have the authority or privilege to comment on this. I mean, I would support, of course, merit-based and economic need-based reservation. Merit-based privileges, scholarships are given worldwide, and need-based scholarships and support is given worldwide. I think those two should be the only criteria. Nothing to do with caste, nothing to do with anything else, but or religion or anything else, but only by need and by merit is my humble answer. But who are we to comment on these big political questions?
I think when it comes to caste system, even though there is so much knowledge that is given by scholars and professors like yourself, but the truth is that manifestations of caste system are dangerous in how they um, show up in our society and interact with the layman, the everyday common man. And those are people that are usually trying to find remedy in our sampradayas, in our gurus, in our babas. And so one very famous scholar like that is Dhirendra Shastri ji, who has gained a lot of traction because of his great thoughts and the kind of teaching that he does on a regular basis. One of the initiatives that he's taken is the Hindu Jodo Yatra. And he says that even though intercaste marriage is something that is not mandated by Hindu scriptures, it is something that is the need of the hour so that we can consolidate Hindu support regardless of what our caste looks like by birth. So, what is your stance on that?
Actually, again, I lost some of your words because of the Wi-Fi issue.
I'll just repeat my question, sir.
Yeah.
My question. My question was that the Hindu Jodo Yatra by Dhirendra Shastri ji, he is basically saying that intercaste marriage is not something that is stated by Hindu scriptures, but it should be done something right now because it is the need of the hour. Because Hindu consolidation can happen with intercaste marriage being the reality of today. So, what is your stance on making intercaste marriage a Hindu initiative to see consolidation within the community?
Oh, should intercaste marriages be promoted? You're asking. I think it should be left to the individuals, right? I mean, I don't think there should be one universal rule for marriages, I think, right? Marriage is such a personal question, and all matrimonial columns, all matrimonial websites are full of all kinds of criteria to decide the matrimonial alliances, caste being a very important role, and which is what we often forget is the caste-based marriage rules are exactly coming from directly from endogamy practices across the world in indigenous communities. That is what I said multiple times during my presentation. And as far as intercaste issues, marriages go, I think I would just leave it to the individual. I don't think there should be one universal rule to promote intercaste. Or it's not a joke to decide about marriage and then to keep that marriage sacrosanct across, throughout your life. It's a very serious matter, and I don't think one universal law should be made about that. That's my humble take.
That brings us to the end of the question answer session, sir. Thank you very much for entertaining our questions, and we wish to have
Thank
many
you.
such talks with you. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.